Bijon, I would say that entrepreneurship is now growing. It's a buzzing topic. There's a lot of other offices and stakeholders who are coming in, trying to understand entrepreneurship, trying to understand what our youths would be interested in.
BCG just projected Bangladesh to become a $1 trillion economy. PwC has projected that by 2030 and by 2060, India is going to be bigger than the US. That's something, right? We talk about regional blocks, but I think South Asia as a block is definitely very, very powerful.
Bijon, over to you.
Hi, everyone. A warm welcome to day 3 of the ANDE South Asia Convening. Very excited to be starting off the panel with something that's very close to all of our hearts, impact investing and what instruments you can use to take this forward. So very, very excited to have a high-profile panel. But before we kind of head off to the panel, I'm going to invite Ashutosh, our Member Secretary of the National Advisory Board for Impact Investing in Bangladesh, to give us, welcome us all with a speech. Ashutosh, over to you.
Thank you, Bijon. It's always nice to see you. I always like you. In fact, you have been with us in the entire journey of impact investment with us. First of all, I would like to thank Sucharita Kamnath, because for the last 1 year we have been interacting with them on, have been looking into the MOU and all these things that have paperwork that we have gone. And today I'm very glad to see that we are engaged, particularly Bangladesh, NAB and Impact Investment Bangladesh are engaging itself with ANDE South Asia Convening of 2024. I like the idea that they are focusing on the small and growing businesses, and also what they call the missing middle. I like that. So one good thing that I've been seeing that Sucharita, you are unfolding your wings from subcontinent, from India to other countries. We are very happy to see you are roping in countries like Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh. That's how the spirit should be, and that's how we think we should take forward because we see in 2021 we are working with global network hosted by Better Stories Bangladesh. Then on 2022 we see another engagement with Better Stories Bangladesh Angel Network, Henchoz, Safal Partners, and Karachi National Incubation Center Karachi. And furthermore, in 2023 also you kept on working with Shanglok, and I'm happy to see that you also were hosting a scale workshop, which is very important of scaling up impact investment. Now, I'm very happy I'm very happy to give you a small resume of what we have done. That the launch of impact movement in Bangladesh 2015, and then we had a summit, international summit, take place in 2016. Creation of NAB, and then eventually accession, if you like the word accession, of Bangladesh into NAB in the global GSG framework as the 19th member in New Delhi. I was there, and then we have at the behest of NAB, we have had a document made on BICEP. With which Bijon was involved. We have also done something like impact translation. It's called On Impact. This is what we translated in Bangla. That is what Sir John Ronnie wanted to do it, and we're the first translators of his little notebook on impact revolution. Impact. So A good thing is further, as I go down, I see that you have picked up possible areas of collaboration of 6 out of 9 from the BICEP recommendation that we have done. And I must thankfully acknowledge the support that we have received from British Council and also the Swiss Development Agency, particularly in the development of the letter of document of BICEP. So we see scope of collaboration on the ecosystem, collaboration among the ecosystem builders, which is we are now doing. Then we are a very important area is standardizing due diligence and also impact measurement and impact management, very important issue. And amplifying this impact story of Bangladesh to others. Then capacity and training builders, and then we are looking into also possible areas supporting increasing participation of women and marginalized group. Then also facilitate the growth of catalytic funding and blended finance, which is why actually OECD countries here, they are really thinking about trying to push up the blended finance with collaboration from government and the private sector and the development partners. So in all that, I would like to thank Sucharita for your initiative to engage with us. And I'm so happy to see a kind of a girth of organizations actually forming a mass that I hope will take this our purpose forward. So without much ado, thank you very much. I would like to pass on back to Bijon. Thank you, Bijon, also.
Thank you, Ashutosh, sir, and also detailing out some of the activities that has happened over the years and coming back on the common thread. I'm going to pass on the mic to Sucharita, the Asia Regional Director for ANDE, just to share a couple of words with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Bijon, and thank you so much for those very kind words. The pleasure and honor is ours. As you rightly pointed out, this is the 3rd year we're actually running this, and we've been trying to grow year on year. This is the first time we're organizing the Bangladesh Impact Investment Day, and the theme has been consistent, right? Which is, let's actually learn from each other in the region. We have much to learn from both successes and failures. I would specifically like to say that what we're very much looking forward to, this entire group, and many of our partners, as you pointed out, have stayed with us over the last 3 years, right? Building ecosystems takes time, and we're happy to wait. I will just say 2 things that we look forward to in terms of action. One is, we see conversations today, this session and the other 2, it's just the beginning of action that we want to see over the next year and years to come. So please do watch for messages that you will receive from the various partners, not necessarily directly from us, but we are very, very keen as ANDE to support the impact investment ecosystem as it develops and evolves in Bangladesh. And we will be very action-oriented to the extent that we practically can. So that's sort of our first sort of ask, request from attendees as well. The other really is to please let us know what you think. It's the first time. We'd love to, and I think look forward to maybe doing this in person next year. NAB has always actually done this in person. We'd like to support the work, but we'd also like to understand from you how we might use the virtual format to overcome some challenges that the in-person event has, right? So both on these fronts, I've shared my contact details. Please do reach out to us. And please do also join us for the other 2 sessions, which have been very, very carefully curated. So with those words, Bijon, back to you. Very, very excited for this opening panel of today. We have a very, very erudite bunch of folks who work across countries in the region. And yes, over to you without any further ado.
Thank you, Sucharita. And again, I'm going to dive right back in the panel now. I'd like to welcome first Corinne, Henchoz, Pignani, the Charity Affairs of the Embassy of Switzerland in Bangladesh. Very excited to have you. Next, we're going to have Chandula Abeywickrema, Chairman of the Sri Lanka National Advisory Board for Impact Investing. Chandula, very excited to have you, and great to see you as well. I'm going to invite Simmi, Sareen, Director of Unitus Capital from India next. We just met like 10 minutes back, but good to see you again. And I don't know if Ashutosh Tiwari has joined yet, Director of Safal Partners. But hey,
He
Ashutosh,
has, Bijon.
yeah, thank you for joining us. Very glad. So yeah, we're gonna kick it off. I'm gonna start the first round of question with each of the panelists. Who do I put on the spot? Maybe I start with Corinne, because I think I know you the longest among all four. So I'll put you on the spot and then move how you're structured across the screen from me, all of you, so you know who's coming next. So Corinne, we know that the Embassy of Switzerland in Bangladesh is doing a lot of work, right? We know you're supporting the impact ecosystem with your program. We know of the Bijon program that has been working it over the last 4 years. So can you tell us a bit more about your work, the programs that you are doing in Bangladesh, especially taking the impact ecosystem forward? What are some of the results that you have achieved, and how do you see this impact ecosystem evolve in Bangladesh and, of course, in South Asia as well? Corinne, over to you.
Thank you, Bijon, and I'm happy to be put on the spot because indeed in Bangladesh, Switzerland has been working on the impact investing scene since 2020. And we have been partnering with enterprises, with service providers. We have also teamed up with the investors and regulators. And what we have been trying to do is to promote an impact readiness and impact monitoring environment. So now, what have we achieved so far? So in the past 4 years, what we found fascinating to observe is how the local ecosystem for impact investing has matured, and how, more importantly, we could showcase how impact investing makes a difference in the life of those that are either left behind, vulnerable, or who need a special service. So for example, so far in terms of numbers, we managed to reach out over 150,000 low-income beneficiaries, and we have been able to finance 15 scalable enterprise. So now what we have also been able to achieve is by putting together the best of the private sector, which is how you get organized to make profit, with the best of international cooperation. How can you make a difference in the life of people that needs to feel a difference, in line with the 2030 agenda of the United Nations? And so what we have been achieving also with these two sectors put together in the last 4 years is, first of all, we introduce impact monitoring. Very important. How do you measure and understand and have a joint definition on impact monitoring? We have also been able to create awareness, how in the context like Bangladesh, impact investing is the right tool. And also we managed to have through the BSEC, a joint definition of what impact investing is. So now, what comes next? Because that's what is interesting. What comes from the future? So for us, what we see, the learning so far in impact monitoring and measurement practices has to be shared to a broader group of stakeholders. And this is very important in impact measuring and monitoring under a common understanding at a time where Bangladesh is going through a very important change, and when we need to keep the trust of the investors, because we need investors right now in Bangladesh. The second thing that we have learned and that we are pushing going forward is the gender lens investing, and we have partnered with True Value for this. And we see that this gender lens investing can make really also a difference in terms of impact. And the last thing that we would like to push forward in the future future, because you know you believe what you see, right? So that's what human beings we are. We are, you know, the proof of the pudding is the eating. So for us, it's very important, together with our partners, to disseminate learning, learning, knowledge, experience, best practices. And you know, now again, where Bangladesh is in its trajectory, it's very important that, you know, to keep being active, proactive, and push forward the impact investing approach. And we are very much looking forward to pursuing that together with our partners. So thank you, Bijon. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Corinne, and I'm glad that you covered a lot of ground. And I really like that you said that you're also working very deeply on monitoring and management, because I think it comes down to what you can measure, you cannot measure, and then the investment actually doesn't have value, right? And I am glad that you're thinking of synergies across different partners, but also with regional partners as well, where we take the learnings from everyone and take it forward. And that gives me a bit of segue where I move to Chandula next. Chandula, again, great to have you. We know that you have a lot of experience with the Lanka Impact Investing Network, Private Limited, which is LIN. I think it's the first ever impact fund in Sri Lanka. So what are some of the instruments that you have used in your experiences with the fund? And what would be some of the key learnings that we can all take away from?
Thank you,
Chandula,
Bijon. Thank you very much. I wish to thank Bill Bangladesh and Fahad also for inviting me for this important forum. Just to set some background to what I'm going to say, as we all know that the South Asia have been more or less debt and lending and credit kind of engagement for almost I would say 7 decades. Investment in equity in entrepreneurship is a kind of new dynamism that has emerged, particularly in the last 2 decades. So it's a totally new dynamism based on the journey of the entrepreneurship that is steered now. Because if you look at the South Asian countries, like the 5 countries that we are now part of it, or 6 countries now, and we see more or less it's the credit, lending, and debt and borrowing kind of words that we used to hear, and we see from my side what we have seen in Sri Lanka need. Because we also have gone through almost 70 years, 7 decades of many lending institutions, banks, as well as multilateral agencies lending to various businesses. But transformation of those businesses from micro to small to commercial has not taken place the way it should have been taken place. One of the reasons is the high cost of debt and the kind of unfriendly mechanism and the products that prevail in the debt market for the entrepreneurs. So what happens is that even the regulator is more focused on the regulating commercial banks to look after the depositors' interest. But whereas the investor interest becomes a very secondary or tertiary for the regulator. So that also has put a lot of issues for friendly investors to walk into the countries like us and to become collaborating partners. So one thing we have done in Sri Lanka is first we realize, I myself have been a banker with almost 4 decades of banking expertise in the development side of banking and the retail. What we have seen is the journey of an entrepreneur is not properly mapped in sometimes. And as a result of that, I see any entrepreneur has to have 3 important stages. The one is commercial viability at the short, mid, and the long term. The scalability of the business in the short, mid, and the long term. And then the sustainability of the business, short, mid, and long term. Now, in order to do that commercial viability, scalability, and sustainability of any enterprise, journey has to be properly mapped. And to mapping that is, they need to really, first and foremost, journey is not just 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, probably beyond. The journey of an enterprise and the entrepreneur is different. So what we have seen is that sometimes the small businesses, entrepreneurs in the SME category does not spend much effort and resources on research and development and innovation. So the research and development and innovation cannot be supported by the bank loans or own capital. It has to be infusion of proper impact related investors that need to come in. Now, when we have the impact investors come in, the small ticket investments has to be really worked out in a way that there is interest for investor as well as interest for entrepreneur, as well as the interest for all the stakeholders who are going to be owners of the success of any enterprise. So that's where sometimes a marginalization takes place when it comes to small ticket investments. And then we have large, big impact investors unable to walk into countries like small countries because the ticket size is small as far as each entrepreneur's investment is concerned. So then we need to really look at the vehicles like big society capital and create a fund of funds and thereby and create small ticket size investment tickets to invest in respective enterprises. So what we have done in Sri Lanka is we realized we are a small country compared even to other our neighboring all other countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. So our entrepreneurs ticket size is really small, and we need to make sure that our small entrepreneurs really go on that journey, as I mentioned, the journey of making their enterprise commercially viable in the short, mid, and the long term, and then scalable short, mid, and the long term, sustainable in the short and mid term. And that's where the infusion of impact investing with a small ticket size investments that need to come in. And therefore, there are so much of things that need to be done there. First and foremost, we have to create the social entrepreneur ecosystem, because sometimes when we really map out the journey of our entrepreneur or enterprise and the kind of the scale is material to them, and also the reaching a certain number that make investors interest into coming into countries like us is absolutely key. And also, so we also realize there are the Swiss ambassador, as she mentioned, that gender lens investment. We are also focused greatly on women-focused investors. There are plenty of women entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs in this country, in Sri Lanka, and of course, they need significant hand-holding. And sometimes some of them are startups, some of them are up and running good businesses, but significant hand-holding, mentoring. So the investors with hand-holding capabilities, mentoring capabilities need to walk into partner with the entrepreneurs that we are talking about in Sri Lanka. We are talking about in the area of agriculture, education, healthcare, and many other industries that Sri Lanka talks about in relating to commercial agriculture and tourism. So there's plenty of opportunities, and there is plenty of opportunities for entrepreneurs. So we are really created the fund now. It's like the fund of funds, and then we would be partnering with number of other key like-minded stakeholders, and then ensure that ticket size are made available, affordable, accessible to the respective entrepreneurs. As I said, AAA make this respective equity impact investing available, affordable, and accessible is key. We are working on different products of investments, product of different shapes and sizes, but also we are bringing in the tools of impact measurements. In fact, we are partnered with the UNDP because they have designed us a tool for impact measurements and valuation of the respective entrepreneurs. And then we have also raised within Sri Lanka number of Sri Lankan passionate impact investor group, along with inviting number of large impact investors to come from overseas to Sri Lanka. So what we are doing is we are very vigorously and very carefully, very thoughtfully creating a entrepreneur ecosystem, bringing number of things into space. As I said, the three things like making the entrepreneurs commercially viable, scalable, and sustainable. Those three things are important to create impact investor interest. We are working on that in the ecosystem creation. Then we are looking at the number of mentoring program for the investors as well as the entrepreneurs. Then we are also looking at the nurturing of the women entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs into graduating to different levels in their journey of enterprise. Then with that, we are creating the impact investing landscape in Sri Lanka first time. Actually, it's now almost 5 years of work. We have now laid a lot of, as I told you, the regulators are still more or less regulating the banking and the finance institution to protect the customer deposits. Their focus is still not on the investor safeguarding and protection. So we need to make sure the investors able to bring the money. They need to kind of exit within 5 years or 10 years, and they need to take the money out, and all these regulatory mechanisms are in place. So we have been talking to various public sector mechanism infrastructure operators to ensure these things, but it's a long journey. But we are surely some areas we are walking step by step. Some areas we are inch by inch moving, but we are moving in the right direction. And I'm sure within the next 10 years, Sri Lanka would emerge as a kind hub for impact investing in Asia.
Well, thank you, Chandula. And I think you covered quite a large variety of very, very complex topics beautifully, right? I think I really like that how it started off that, TED capital possibly as entrepreneurs grow, they need more patient capital and where impact investing comes in. But you also touched on things like smaller ticket sizes, right? So we can support more larger enterprises, of course, but I think you also need to work at the root level, right? And I really liked how you also identified the gaps and what you were doing to address those gaps. I really like the fund of funds idea, right? I think where you can really scale the size of the fund across different partners, right? And what infrastructures, regulations need to be there so that investors also feel confident. So, thank you, Chandula, for sharing your experiences. Very, very well taken. I'm going to move to Simmi next. Hi, Simmi. So we have seen you have extensive experience in financial services. I was looking at your bio, previous when I was drafting the questions, right? So then this popped into me. What made you transition as you founded an impact-focused investment bank, Unitus Capital? What made you go there, right? And as you have done the journey, how have you balanced social and environmental returns with financial returns in your portfolio? Simmi, over to you.
Thanks, Bijon. Very glad to be here. And yes, you're right. I did start my career doing mainstream banking and investment banking for many, many years. But about 12 years back, I made the switch to the world of impact investing, but largely focused on climate finance. So what we do today is essentially focus on building an ecosystem that supports flow of capital into climate action through a variety of means, right? So advising and mentoring companies, investment banking, research, working with investors on advocating more investments into new and emerging areas of climate action, and creating new structures. All of the elements we believe are important to create a robust climate finance ecosystem. What made me take the plunge into this world, I think beyond the obvious fact that this is highly impactful work, something that's much needed today, it also is a very unique economic opportunity. In fact, if you look at how climate finance has evolved over the last 10, 12 years, it has gone from being a fringe sector with very few investors to now being a sector where pretty much every investor in the world is interested in. If they're not investing already, they are at least exploring the sector and figuring out how to participate in this high growth opportunity. So I know, Chandula talked about the more general gaps that exist as we talk about building the climate finance ecosystem. But I thought maybe it will be more useful if we talk more about what instruments we have kind of thought about, right? Beyond. So yes, there is debt, there is equity, but even with debt and equity funds and non-banking finance companies and banks being there to provide that, there still exist significant gaps in the impact capital that's needed and what's flowing into India and South Asia. India, fortunately, happens to be one of the oldest and the largest markets at this point of time, which means that we have had a chance to look at the standard instruments and then think about, okay, but what are the gaps that exist beyond this and how do we fix that? And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So one challenge that we've seen is affordability. As you talk about mainstreaming climate solutions, let's say you're talking about cooling, when you think about, a large population is in extreme heat or will be in extreme heat and needs cooling solutions, but they can't afford an air conditioner upfront. Or you talk about, let's say, food wastage and providing farmers with equipment that takes care of post-harvest processing, like let's say a solar dehydrator or a cold storage. All of these are solutions that need to go from, very small numbers today to billions of people adopting them. Now, that cannot happen without some form of financing flowing to these customers. Because while they may be able to afford these cold storages or dehydrators or fruit pulpers over time as they make money from them, they cannot afford the upfront cost. So somebody has to fund them, and debt providers typically shy away from funding them because it's high risk, it's new product. So we've seen credit guarantees being used as a very effective mechanism to encourage debt providers to fund these new and emerging use cases. Another area of gap we've seen is simply the fact that we need more investors than exist today, right? Which means that you have to increase the number of investors to include folks who are able to invest climate capital, but need certified end use, need verification that their money is going towards something that's impactful. And for that, we have seen the emergence of structures like social impact bonds, green bonds, blue bonds, and we've issued all of that in the last 2 or 3 years. For example, last year, we structured the first ever waste sector bond in India. So this was a certified green bond that was issued by a company that was looking to do a material recovery facility, creating value out of plastic and municipal waste. Now, this is a new company which would not have raised this capital from a regular debt or an equity source, but they were able to essentially access a specific pool of capital available for green end use only by working on establishing that end use towards the known call, Finally, I would touch briefly on the point that Chandula mentioned, right? That while there is enough capital available and there are enough entrepreneurs available, we have a mismatch between large DFIs, right, who want to invest hundreds of millions of dollars, and startups who need like $500,000 or $2 million. And large investors globally are just not equipped to do those ticket sizes directly, which basically means that we need more local structures, be it funds, be it debt providing entities who are able to accept that capital and then onward invest it into the local startup ecosystem. There we have seen innovation in the form of blended finance structures in the funds being set up themselves, right? So for example, many new sector-focused funds, let's say the first ever agri fund or the first ever adaptation fund, will be considered too risky by LPs who would invest in such funds usually. So building in concessional capital layers, building in philanthropic capital layers, which kind of makes sure that there is a philanthropic layer which takes the first loss, and then commercial returns are available to the rest of the LPs in the fund, has enabled India to build multiple such sector-focused funds, which can now invest in very specific end use and highly impactful cases. So I'll leave you with these 3 examples, Bijon, but as you can see, these are all very exciting new structures, which kind of, one, keep us engaged in terms of, if we are only getting 20% of what we need, and we need to go from, let's say, what India got 20 billion in capital last year for climate, we need 110 billion. How do you fix those? So to us, as somebody who's building the ecosystem, it's very exciting to see there's a lot of capital, but how do we build the right structures, deliver that capital to the startups who need it?
No, thank you, Simmi, for that. And I could see that you could talk about it all day, for how you're explaining things, the passion that you had. And I'm glad that you gave us very, very specific examples. So we started off with things like credit guarantee allows unlock more debt capital, de-risking the investment to a certain way. We talked about bonds, but going more specific. I mean, I really like the West management example, right? That tying about grain. And then, of course, I think we talked about more constitutional capital, DFIs also coming in, acting as first laws, right? And I'm glad I think all of this would be needed in a mix as we move forward, and we need to unlock more capital. But really, really grateful for sharing those examples. I'm moving on to Ashutosh now. Hey, Ashutosh. I was reading up on Safal partners, and what really caught my eye is that you work with early stage entrepreneurs, which is needed because if the pipeline is not there, nothing will happen. And also like that you were providing smart capital. It's just not capital, right? You were providing it with expertise, with management support, right? Which often early stage entrepreneurs need. So my question would be, how do you design these investments? Because it's investments plus a bit of maybe market network, bit of capacity building. And then because it's an angel network, you have a lot of angels. There are multiple angels in each round. So if you could help us understand the structures you have used a bit, and what would be your most popular investment instrument? Ashutosh, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bijon. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I was a little rushed this morning, but so let me give you a quick sketch of Nepal's landscape. That is, in terms of investment. That is, for a long time, I think this country, Nepal, we've been dependent on aid and charity money. So that pool is now running out, so to speak. Now there are private companies in Nepal, primarily banks, that are focused more on CSR. But their CSR money is going primarily to NGOs and the social sector soft organizations, if you will. So in the last 10 years, what is happening in Nepal is that private investors have come into the scene, especially impact funds with money from European banks and other European banks as well. And basically, they've set up shop here. And what they've done is, and most SMEs or small business, or for that matter, startups in Nepal do not require, $10 million right off the bat. They require something like, maybe $100,000 at most, basically. And that's where we come in. Not before designing the instrument and all that, we work with the entrepreneurs, the small business, the startup ready. So what does that mean? That basically means, basically.
I think Ashutosh just, Ashutosh, we can see you again.
Sorry. Okay. Can you hear me again? Sorry. As I was saying, what happens is that, basically, making sure that they have their paperwork ready, their finances ready, and also they can deal with uncertainty, and also they can chart a growth path ahead. So that's what we work on. And right now, we recently finished a report for Hyper International on impact investment in Nepal. So there is a huge shortage of capital in Nepal, especially investment capital. The institutions here are primarily banks, large commercial banks, and finance institutions, and also cooperatives, as well as microfinance institutions. But they've been doing traditional lending work, basically. It's not really investment. It's mostly lending work. So now we are thinking of, Nepal, in theory, is a very attractive destination for global impact investors. But whenever we talk to investors, global impact investors, their questions are about, what's the risk? How much uncertainty do we have to deal with? What are the return parameters? In terms of communications, what do I get every 3 months? And what are the impacts I'm looking at, And we do not have case studies. We do not have actual live examples to say, this is what you'll be getting in Nepal. So this is what we are working now with Hyper International and other INGOs, basically developing some case studies, especially in agriculture, water sanitation, youth employability, and so forth. So basically, working with the small businesses, small organizations, making sure that they're investment ready over a period of a year, 18 months, and all that. And then going back to the global impact investors saying, some of our institutions are ready for impact investment. You remember you had all these concerns about impact, returns, uncertainty, and all that. I think we have good answers to them. Now come to Nepal and, start having your money flow into the system so that we can have a first live case of real impact invest in Nepal. So that's the story we are building up more and more. So that's what's going on right now. But in terms of our work with entrepreneurs, it's mostly making them, like I said, really acting as a business coach, providing real good advice. Because I've run companies before, my colleagues have also run other companies before. We come on what looks good on paper. So a lot of our clients and entrepreneurs have valued their advice. So we work a lot on the investment ready space, and we also work with the regulators because we try to introduce this particular instrument called venture debt that has really gone nowhere in Nepal because there is a lot of regulatory learning that we have to do, because the traditional model, like I said, bank loans, interest rates, these are very clear-cut terms, but we need sophisticated financial instruments, and this is where I hope to learn from Sri Lanka and from Bangladesh and certainly from India, looking at some of the instruments that you've mentioned and how those could be applied in Nepal. So for now, I think to answer your question, Bijon, I would say that we haven't had a great experience running a lot of instruments because there are regulatory hurdles, which we're trying to overcome by quote unquote educating the regulators, working with the regulators and all that. But for now, there is a widespread understanding that access to finance is very much needed, and there are multiple paths to that. That much understanding is clear, and impact investment is being one. So right now, we're developing case studies among small businesses and startups, and even among agriculture cooperatives to make sure that they have compelling stories to tell to global impact investors, and whereby we can make a pitch to them. They can start coming to Nepal. We'll develop a few case studies and then grow from there actually. So in the meantime, we do have a pool of investors in Nepal, but again, it is run like an amateur outfit at the moment because the instruments aren't there yet. So there is interest. So it's a matter of marrying it together, and we at Safal Partners are at the forefront of gluing all the pieces together, so to speak, and the work is ongoing. I'll stop here, Bijon. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ashutosh. I think that's very, very useful. And I'm glad that you are experimenting with different kind of instruments. You mentioned about venture debt, but you also acknowledged that there are regulatory hurdles. And then again, this is where I think this room is for learning across the region what would work, what is working, and then we can all adapt and maybe also do the advocacy of it together because, what would possibly be needed in Nepal that would be needed in other parts of South Asia as well. I think we are running a bit short on time, so I'm going to speed this up a bit and do kind of like the last round, kind of like a bit more quick fire. So Corinne, here is your quick fire questions. What are your favorite innovative finance instruments from Bangladesh, and what we need to do to scale them up?
Okay, so we have two blended finance instrument, and I would say for Bangladesh, for where we are, the one that is extremely relevant is the impact ready matching funds, and these funds motivates on one hand startup and small companies to really work towards impact, but it also enable them financially to demonstrate their story, and to also show to potential investors that what they are saying when it comes to impact really is there, measurable and scalable. Over to you, Bijon.
No, thank you, Corinne. Loud and clear. I think thank you for mentioning Impact Ready Matching Fund as well. I think very, very relevant, and not just in Bangladesh, but I think beyond as well. Chandula, I'm going to go to you next. You did mention a lot of regulatory hurdles, some of the things that you were doing. So if you were given a choice to expand impact investing in Bangladesh, what are the 3 regulations you will tackle from your perspective first? Thank you.
Very, very difficult question to answer. I must tell you that very clearly, what we have currently among the entrepreneurs or the SMEs or the business people and the banking or the lending or the debt kind of a thing, it's a marriage of convenience. What I would say, because they're quite comfortable with each other. They don't ask too many questions, interfere into their business. They lend based on your security or whatever it is. But when it comes to investor, it's a marriage of inconvenience, because investor would come into your business and become a part of your business. You need to disclose your information. You need to bring your balance sheet information, income tax information. So that kind of a thing has to be handheld and mentored and taken to a different level, because between the marriage of convenience to marriage of inconvenience between investor and investee need to be really, because even the regulators are not really familiar with this. They are not really, they are quite comfortable with regulating the banks. But when it comes to investors, making them comfortable, making them facilitation for exit and entry and exit is something which they don't have the mechanism or the supervisory staff to do it. So they need to reinvent themselves. The regulator themselves had to reinvent in the space of impact investing, and towards that there need to be a kind of a collaborative partnership between the regulator, the investor, the entrepreneurs, and the other stakeholders to come up with a wider range of solutions. That's what I say. It's depending from country to country diversity. So I think it's important. What I would say, my advice would be to kind of really, because the regulator doesn't have that expertise, bring the impact investing other country which has done successfully, bring them and bring as multiple possible number of stakeholders like investors, entrepreneurs, regulators, and other stakeholders together and come up with a very viable, scalable and sustainable solutions to cover wider range of entrepreneurs in different shapes and sizes who are willing to go in this journey of marriage of inconvenience. Because there is a lot of intervening, interference, and integrating into this journey of investor empowering the entrepreneurs.
No, thank you, Chandula. And I think I'm glad that how you started that. It's new, and there are a lot of I think the stress or pushback from the entrepreneurs themselves as well. And it's not self-liquidating. So the regulators also need to understand how the entry into the business and the exit will also happen. So thank you very much for mentioning those as well. I'm going to move to Simmi next. Simmi, you mentioned very, very interesting instruments like the credit guarantee, like constitutional capital forming blended finance, like the bonds. What are the three biggest risks that you see as we scale these instruments up across different South Asian economies?
So I guess, Bijon, to me, I think there are three critical elements of why these instruments grow and scale, right? Number one is picking the right projects. Because we found that when people want to structure these instruments, they want to pick the most impactful grassroots projects. And while that is a great thought, but we have found that it's helpful when starting out in a new country, when starting out with a new instrument, to pick the most viable projects. Now, these projects could be something that are more, established companies, but having early success or having case studies to show that, yes, something was issued and it successfully returned capital, provided returns to investors, becomes then the pathway for the more impactful, more risky projects to raise capital. So picking the right, entrepreneurs, the right projects is very important. I think what's equally important is, I think, having, that sensitization for both the founders and the investors, right? Because founders may have great businesses, great projects, but there is a learning curve in terms of raising this capital, in terms of building the impact matrix, the reporting mechanism, the verification mechanism that investors will need. And I think that is the biggest risk, right? Because if you don't do that properly, if your instruments in the early days get, basically tainted by things like greenwashing, even unintentionally, that actually affects the entire country's scaling up plan from there, or the entire instrument scaling up plan. The third one I'll quickly mention, but that's very, very critical, is a supportive policy environment. And it's not just about, supporting policy for investors in terms of exits, taking the capital in and out. That's very important. But also having consistent policies for the sectors they're investing in, right? Let's say you want to invest 20-year capital in a solar project. But if the solar policy on net metering or how the business operates keeps changing every 3 years, then as an investor, you can't make that investment decision. So having a supportive and also very consistent policy environment is critical for these instruments to scale.
No, thank you, Simmi. I think this is, very, very, very gives us a lot of thought. I think I think the core that you addressed, that we have to pick the right projects to start off with, right? I think without that, I think things will not go nowhere. And then, of course, I think continuity of policy is something that we also face in Bangladesh. Like, when the government changes, sometimes the policies that were enacted also gets changed, right? I know that creates problems, of course, to investors who have invested in and debtors, future investors as well. So thank you for mentioning this. Ashutosh, I'm going to give the last quick fire round question to you with something that we also face a lot of challenge in, and because you have had experience of managing a lot of angels, how do you get these early stage investors interested in impact? How do you have done that? Thank you.
So basically, we work with them very closely, and what that means is that we tell them that upfront that angel investment or early stage investment is a lot of risk. They may actually lose their money. So when you say that, half of them drop out, so to speak, and the other half, the committed half, I would like to call them, they stay on. And we tell them that it's basically working very closely with the entrepreneurs, holding their hands, advising them, being their mentors, and really seeing them through a very difficult and risky period of their entrepreneurial journey, actually. So there's a lot of I would call it maybe education. I mean, a lot of educating work that we need to do with investors as well, because in Nepal, I think and this probably applies to all of South Asia, that people are used to getting quick returns, and if they don't get quick returns, then they badmouth you, or they say that somehow you quote unquote eaten your money and all the rest of it. So we have to there is a lot of education that goes on with the investors, saying this is something that may not pay off. Are you comfortable losing X amount of money? If nothing comes through. And they have to be really comfortable with that. And again, it's easier said than done, obviously. So our team does a lot of time with the investors. And if they feel that, you should get a certain return and they're adamant about it, maybe other investors might be better for them. So the investment part is there. So we work with them. And also we work with the regulators. And with the regulator, with the changes in regulators, that can be quite difficult. But our team also works with the central bank and also with some of the financial journalists and so forth, basically pitching certain ideas in the public domain, saying Nepali entrepreneurs need money, banks can only do so much, and much of the lending is about land-based collateral, and the rest, we need to broaden that sort of, collateral-based lending. We need to look at other instruments, and then we pitch, angel investment, early stage investment, private capital flowing into the market, so that work is also going on. And the third thing we do is a lot of impact investors come to Nepal as tourists, actually. They want to go climb mountains or go on a trek and hikes and all that. And some of them are willing to stay behind a day or two in Kathmandu and talk to entrepreneurs. Basically they like to say something like, if you do X and Y, we might be able to come, and that also educates the market, so to speak. These are some of the ways we work with early stage investors and also with entrepreneurs here. Bijon?
Well, thank you, Ashutosh. And I like that the capacity building part that you do with your entrepreneurs. You also do that with investors, learning them through the process, working them, co-creating solutions. Also, like the last bit, that you were in the mountain, soaking in the beautiful Himalayas, and then also you're more impact oriented than you are in the middle of the city, right? So thank you for mentioning that. Maybe we should use that other parts of South Asia as well. No, thank you. I think we are within time. So with that, we're going to formally end the panel part of the discussion. We're going to move on to the Q&A session. I think we have already received Q&As in the box, which I think the panelists can see if they're going to click, but I'm going to read that out in order of which I have them, so that we can also answer some of this as well. If anyone wants to also put in, please feel free to use the chat window or here on the Q&A to ask your questions as well. I think the first question is actually to Corinne. Corinne, I don't know if you can see the question, but I'm going to read it out for ease as well. That you have supported the NAB and the ecosystem building. So just the questioner wanted to understand that what was the ecosystem like before 2020? And because the NAB was done in 2018, are you also part of that from the beginning of 2018 as well? So Corinne, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, we formally entered the ecosystem in 2020, but of course, it took us quite a bit of time to to explore and to understand the context. Switzerland has been in Bangladesh since the independence. So we have a long journey of cooperation with Bangladesh, and it was very much about understanding what was needed as the story of Bangladesh, as Bangladesh evolved. And we were from day one included in the NAB, and I participated together with Ashutosh to the launch of the NAB Bangladesh. Over to you.
Thank you, Corinne. I think that's very, very helpful. The next question, I'm going to move to Chandula. I see that you have started typing the answer, but I'm possibly for the benefit of the audience, I'm going to also ask it out here. And a very, very important question as well, that how do you assess the trustworthiness or creditworthiness of an entrepreneur, right? Over to you.
I think I mentioned the three important things that any entrepreneur based on his enterprise. See, what happens is entrepreneur and enterprise is two different things. The enterprise has a long journey. And in that journey, what I mentioned is that trustworthiness is earned through these three things. The commercial viability in the short, mid, and the long term. So he has to make sure that his business has the commercial viability in the short term, mid term, long term. When I talk about long term, I'm talking about 30 to 40 years. Then he need to also have his business ability to scale to a different level dynamically in the short, mid, and the long term. If you don't reach scalability, you can never reach, never earn trust. You want to make sure that you can't be a very small entity continuously. There is no way any investor will earn any trust. Thirdly, is about the sustainability. It's not only he need to understand who are his stakeholders, his shareholders, his customers, his employees, his environment, and his society, and all these stakeholders, how he looks after those stakeholders in the process of his running his enterprise, and also succession planning. Who is the next generation who is going to take over his business? And all these things have to be properly mapped, even a small enterprise. And those through those things only trustees earn. And then when the trustees earn through those, these are things which can be measurable. Trust in an enterprise, it's not just I trust you, you trust me. It's not like that. It has to make some meaningful numbers. And meaningful numbers comes as a result, as a key elements which I mentioned: commercial viability, scalability, and sustainability. And that has to be reflected in numbers. Then you earn the confidence and trust. This is a enterprise worth looking at for a long journey. And even the entrepreneur exit enterprise has a track that will go on for next generations. So that's where it is not trust of the entrepreneur per se, but more or less a trust of the enterprise and its journey that investors would always have.
Thank you, Chandula. I think this is very, very useful. And I like that you mentioned the points, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to, because it's a long journey together, right? It's not like a debt capital for 6 months, 1 year, you get in, get out, right? It's more like partnership, right? Often a marriage at times, right? I think that's why that part is very, very important, right? I'm going to move on to the next, Simmi. So we have a question for you as well, that we need, of course, more investors, impact investors. But just like you have transitioned, to Impact Investment Bank, how do you train or have next generation of impact investors over the next decade?
Okay, so Bijon, I will say that the good news is that in the last 5 years, we have many interested impact investors, right? So we've seen that everyone from DFIs to mainstream VCs and PEs are talking about potentially looking at climate action or impact as a sector they're interested in. So that's the good news. The not so good news is that most of these investors are curious and they're still applying the same age-old VC thesis, which is we're investing in a software company, we want to get 5x returns in 4 years and exit, to something like climate as well, right? And that does not work. Because climate businesses are different. These are businesses which have a longer lead time because you have to do research, pilots, and sell physical assets, not software, which means that the entire return profile, the duration you need to generate those returns is very different from a standard VC model of very software-centric investments. So while they are exploring investments, many have not made their first investment yet because it does not fit their investment model. And that's where I think a lot of initiatives come in to help these investors move the needle, right? I think it has to be a combination of different things. It can't be just one thing. So there's obviously, initiatives like, just advocacy, right? So talking to investors about thesis, showing them research, showing them return profiles, but also more formal programs, right? So we recently teamed up with ANDE, for example, to do an investor management training focused on waste and circularity investments. And we had like 10, 12, fund managers in the room. We are hoping that some of them will end up doing, some waste investments in the next couple of years. Similar program was run for Africa as well. So that's one. But I think what really moves the needle for investors is them having visibility of, a solid pipeline, because most of them are like, yes, we want to spend resources on this, but can we see that there's a pipeline of entrepreneurs we can invest in? So the more entrepreneur pipeline you can show them, and even more important than then, if you can start showing success, right? If they start seeing returns, we've already seen returns in areas like solar, for example. Once we start seeing returns in areas like food systems or waste or energy efficiency, you will just pull in more investors. So yes, you need to sensitize them to a different investment thesis and a different model of investing. But the only way to push more people into investing is for them to see others who have invested, and for them to see there's a pipeline of, more potential investments that they can come into.
No, thank you, Simmi, and I'm glad that more and more people are getting interested. But also, I think the point about pipeline is very valid, because I think that's where they will get excited. There are a lot of fantastic entrepreneurs out there, and I think that will definitely get people excited. No, thank you for mentioning all those points. Suchrita, I do see your hands up. Do you want to interject something here? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just since both Ashutosh and Simmi brought it up, right, Bijon, I think the point that I'd like to share around the piece that Simmi specifically mentioned is that this takes time, right? What Simmi has and other partners have been doing with us on that investor education, de-risking piece, right? That's the attempt. It actually has been a 4-year project, right? And even at the end of it, we would have moved some. Yeah, and I just want to sort of reinforce that particular point, in response to the question, right? Which is, if we want to do all of this and as the ecosystem evolves, one is remember that it takes time, varying degrees depending on where each country is in their journey. And the other is it also takes money, right? A lot of this ecosystem building work needs somebody to support it, like Corinne has been doing in Bangladesh, and others have been doing here as well. So just wanted to sort of specifically call out those 2 points and hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Suchrita. I see that Arthur, sir, if you want to interject as well, if we move on to the next question. Yeah. You're muted. Yeah.
My question is to Corinne. When I was working with the government, I saw clearly some interest, particularly from the Europeans, and specifically the Switzerland. They wanted to promote blended finance. And to this end, the OECD was organizing, I think they made 3 or 4 volumes how to make that blended finance work in countries where they can kind of substitute direct for paid foreign aid, then rather give these blended finance facilities, where the government, public money, or the donors' money can be mixed and matched with the private sector money and come out with that. I'm not sure to what extent, Corinne, you could go forward with this idea, because government was also trying to talk it out, and I think that was done at the behest of the Swiss embassy. Thank you.
Right, thank you for this question. So, as I said, now in Bangladesh, we are in transition. We are in a political, social, and economic transition. What we, prior to the event of August 2024, what we managed to have at the side of the regulators is to have impact investing as part of the, of the startup framework or startup regulation. So that was something that we were happy with. Now, of course, 100 days and a bit more in a transition in Bangladesh remains a little bit open. What's going to happen. And in terms of the regulatory framework, and currently, what is the focus of the current government is, of course, to work on the financial sector, and the focus is there. So now, for development partners of Bangladesh. So what we are seeing is that back home in the global West, there is or North, sorry. There is a pressure on development cooperation fund for many different reasons that I'm not going to expand here. So indeed, as Ashutosh was mentioning, like in Nepal, ODA is going to diminish in the years to come, most probably for Bangladesh, also because so far the authorities haven't said that they're not going to graduate out of the least development countries. So it means that the blended finance instruments that we have been tested with our Be Pretty program, and that we are also expanding with our Access to Green Finance program, has a lot of interest from other development partners. Now, in which way and how quickly the journey will go, it's a question I cannot answer. But what there is a joint understanding is that it is not the time to quit impact investing. It's not the time to quit the MSMEs of Bangladesh, because as we have seen in the aftermath of COVID-19, they were the one pushing up, the economic activities and serving the excluded in the community. Or in the society. So blended finance instruments are a good way forward. So that's what I would say, but maybe Bijon, you can also complement. I know it's a bit difficult in your role of moderator. Over to you.
Thank you, Corinne.
No, thank you, Corinne, and thank you for the question as well. And I think we can again talk all day here on blended finance, very topic, very close to my heart. But I'm just also cognizant of time, and I'm going to move forward with the, I think 3 more questions we have, so I'm going to try to answer them as well. I think this one, Ashutosh, I'll hand it over to you. And very interesting question that how do you do advocacy with regulators, right? And because you also mentioned a lot of this in your interjection as well. So I think we can all learn from it. Over to you.
Yes. So basically, I would like to start by saying it's difficult. It's not easy. So basically, meeting them, having structured meetings, as well as in Nepal, I think, thanks to Hefer International's lead, what we've done is, we've started a monthly or bi-monthly impact investors meeting, actually, whereby we invite speakers from the central bank as well as other big investment fund and so forth. They come and talk about investment, how it's important, what are the instruments, so on and so forth. So that also creates a kind of an informal community, the community that can then advocate, at scale with the regulators and so forth. So basically, it's an ongoing process. We also write articles in the Nepali newspapers and all that, advocating for certain instruments, certain policies and all that, and basically making the case that, this instrument unlocks capital. This instrument, provides a fuel or the funds to entrepreneurs, and this instrument, sort of like helps create jobs, So those are the narrative around we shape our interaction with the regulators.
Thank you, Ashutosh. I like that you started by saying that it's not easy, and we all understand it's not the easiest. But I think, we all need to keep working on this. Thank you for sharing the examples how I've been doing it. The last question is not addressed to anyone, so I'm going to keep it open and I'll let one of the panelists pick it up. It's from micro growth social entrepreneurs. The question was that they have founded a business in the water sector. And of course, you have capital expenditures as you set up the water business facilities, and you also cover working capital, marketing, technical, and capacity building. Given that grants are limited from NGOs, the private sector investors also don't want to invest at the very beginning with a proof of business or proof of concept, right? So what kind of impact investment instruments are available for the watch business, and what are the pathways to getting access to some of it? So I'm going to leave it out that if any one of the panelists wants to answer this from their experience or work with watch entrepreneurs. Yeah.
I can take that one. So basically, we have had a lot of investor interest in the watch sector, but not many deals have happened. I think largely because I think the challenge is not just that investors are not seeing, initial pilots. That definitely is something that, we have seen people work up to. But what the entrepreneurs need to determine is whether even post-pilot, there would be a viable business model, right? For private sector investment to come in, if the business model itself does not justify, let's say, a full cost plus margin after all of these costs are accounted for, then it's very difficult for private sector investors to invest in something that's not viable and sustainable, even over a longer period of time. How you can get past that? I think having a combination of, let's say, philanthropic pool of capital, which can take care of the non-business things, right? Because it looks like this business also needs some form of TA, some form of hand-holding of the customers. So that is something that can potentially come from like a blended or a concessional capital pool. And then the business itself, which can be profitable, can essentially run as, a private sector funded, private capital funded entity. The other thing that, and I'm not obviously aware of the specific of this business, but depending on the end use of this water, right? For example, we've seen use cases where it was a water for agriculture project. There has been, a case made for that being a carbon project. And if there is a similar water company or project that exists and they can build like a viable carbon project out of it, that could be an additional source of revenue. But whether it's through business revenues or carbon revenue, I think for private sector capital to come in, they would need to, I think, prove, even if it's not delivered yet, that this business can become profitable and generate returns over time. So I think that would be essentially what would be needed.
Thank you, Simmi. While I still have you on the line, there is another question that I have for you as well, which is regarding the COP29, where it was discussed that there will be close to $300 billion a year, which would come in as government grants, right? So what are some of the instruments, and I think you mentioned some of them, that can be structured in a way which takes kind of utilizes these government the government grant to unlock more capital? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think first of all, I'm not entirely clear that the 300 billion refers to public finance, right? Because if you go back, hello?
Sorry, do you hear me?
Yes, Sucharita, go ahead.
Yeah, that question was for me. Actually, what I was trying to say is that they've promised 300 billion a year, up from 100 billion in climate finance, right? But the dominant discourse is really that the challenge is that this needs to be, since it is public finance, it should be given out as grants and not as loans. Yeah. And therefore, my question to the panel in general is, should that actually be something that's also mimicked when you talk about blended finance instruments, right? And is that why there is this role also, to Corinne's point, right? Which is that something that we should really look at. So that's the connection and question that I had.
Yeah, got it. So Sucharita, I think actually it's not entirely clear that the $300 billion will be grants. I know that was the demand from the developing nations. But if you look at how the 100 billion was counted, it actually included all capital flows from developed to developing, which basically means that they were also counting loans, they were also counting like DFI capital coming into the country as part of the 100 billion, right? So which is why I am actually not entirely sure that 300 billion will be all grants. It appears to me that the developed nations will end up using a combination of the sovereign DFIs that can provide both grants and loans, as well as other blended finance concessional capital structures, including building funds of funds, including government-to-government programs, both grants and loans that would actually get counted as a 300 billion. It's still a win. It's maybe not what, India and other developing nations wanted, but that's what it's most likely to end up being.
Yeah, thanks, Simmi. No, like I said in chat, that is the ask, right? The criticism is that, we haven't really moved, but not to belabor the point, but just to clarify, right? That this should be ramped. Whether it happens or not is to be seen. But my question really is, therefore, isn't that then something we should look at when we're structuring blended finance instruments and the role that grants actually have to play in being able to leverage other private sector capital?
Absolutely. So, for example, there are multiple USAID programs and World Bank programs today, which are grant programs, but they are being used to, for example, form the first loss pools for fund of funds, or create fund of funds that actually then, go into creating blended concessional fund vehicles that then fund these startups. So yes, all of these grants are available and should be available to create new concessional and blended capital structures. Guarantees have been the most used instrument in India, at least, and I expect that will continue to be the case.
No, thank you, Simmi. I think this is very, very useful. I know that we're almost at the end of the session. Ashutosh sir, I'm going to give you the last one. And then
I just wanted to
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that the suggestion that this could be a mix of both grant and loan money, but there are certain loans, like if it is IDA loans, there are loans like loans that is offered by JICA with very soft, with high level of grant element in it, which is more than 35% higher. Then this could also be used usefully within the package of money that they have suggested, about 100 billion or whatever. So that is my suggestion. Even if it's a loan money, but you have to strike the right loan, the right aid, like IDA loan, not IBRD loan. So Japan gives a very cheaper loan. That's okay. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to point out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashutosh sir. And with that, I think the session formally comes to a close. I wanted to give a big hand to Corinne, Chandula, Simmi, and Ashutosh. Great, moderating this panel with all of you. And thanks for being open and honest, right, through this. I think very, very grateful. And yeah, I think the last point is, before I hand over to Suchrita, kind of formally close this, is there is a poll going on. Do give us feedback. We want to get better. And hopefully in the next ANDE South Asia Convening, Suchrita, we're going to meet physically and do this again. Suchrita, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much once again to all of our panelists for sharing openly, honestly, for making the time, and to all of our participants as well. Please do join us for the other two sessions. We've shared the link in chat. Please do give us feedback. And with all of you wonderful folks, look forward to continuing to work with you over the next few years. Thank you once again, and see you at the next session.
Thanks, Charita.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.